It's a joy to spend time with you all, talking about undergrad research, learning from each other, and sharing just a little bit about the work Kristine and I did. I'm here with my colleague, friend, co-author, Kristine Johnson. She's at Calvin University up in Michigan, working with the University Rhetoric department there. I'm at the University of North Georgia down in Southeast Georgia in the southeastern part of the United States. I'm also in the English department. Both of us are former undergraduate researchers, and both of us continued our research and ended up writing a book about undergraduate research. And so that's what we're here to talk with you about, share with you, and learn from you about this afternoon. So let me turn it over to Kristine so she can share some content with us today.
Okay. Thanks, Michael, and hi, everyone. So it's our plan to walk you through our book project, just some of our research questions, what we did, and our major findings. And then after that, we'd like to open it up for discussion and questions. So we're hoping to speak for only 15-20 minutes. Though as we go through, we have a couple slides. As we go through that, if you have any questions or want to stop us, please do. You don't need to wait for us to be done. So let me bring up a couple slides a moment. Okay. So the book that we published this fall with Routledge Press and then in conjunction with the Center for Engaged Learning at Elon University is a long view of undergraduate research, alumni perspectives on inquiry, belonging, and vocation. And those three parts of the subtitle will tell you a little bit about the major themes in the book. So, oh. So this project started sort of in two ways, and Michael will maybe fill in some stories here in a second. One is that, as Luke said, both of us are undergraduate research alumni, and we started to think about, okay, when alumni look back on their research experiences, what do they remember? How did the experience seem to them at the time? Did it matter to them at the time? And how does that experience matter today? We actually started this project because we're both writing scholars and we think about transfer and we think about how skills learned in one domain might transfer to another. And we had questions about if the writing skills, communication skills gained through undergraduate research resonate in the professions later on. And we did answer that question, but what the alumni told us was a lot broader than that. Michael, do you want to fill in anything here?
Sure, just real quick. We wanted to hear from students who had just walked the path of undergraduate research. So I had the opportunity to do undergraduate research a long time ago at a small liberal arts college in South Georgia. And so often my mentoring is based on that experience. I know what was successful for Michael when he was in college. Therefore, I build those same structures thinking this will be successful for the student I'm working with now at the University of North Georgia. So we wanted to hear from students who just walked that metaphorical path, to use a hiking metaphor here for a moment, and hear what trouble spots they noticed, what was helpful, what was beneficial as we continue to build better structures for supporting undergraduate research on our campuses.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, we had written a little bit together before writing this book. And one of the things we've noticed is that student voices are often quite absent from the research on undergraduate research. And through this qualitative work, we asked what would happen when we brought those voices in. So our research process was essentially this. We did in-depth interviews, 30, 45 minutes with 31 undergrad research alumni, and most were within 5 years of their college graduation. We did interview a small group of alumni who were 20 years out from college graduation, but what we learned from them didn't actually become part of the main findings of the book. Oh, apologies. And here is basically what we asked them in the interview. So we asked them to describe their undergraduate research project and their experience. And we said, what you want to tell us about your project is what we want to know. We were fairly open-ended there. We ask them to interpret that experience from where they are today. Sometimes they would tell us about challenges they faced as researchers, and we might say, how do those challenges look to you today now that you're out of college and in a career in graduate school? We ask them how they draw on their undergraduate research experience today. We often would ask them to describe something they do every day in their working life, a common task they do, or a type of presentation they often give. And we ask them to think about if the skills they acquired in undergraduate research have any resonance in that experience. We close the interview with two questions. One is we ask them to respond to scholarly claims about undergraduate research. So I think people on this call today are familiar with the research that says that undergraduate research helps students become stronger writers and stronger researchers, and maybe even gives them a better sense of belonging on campus. We asked them to respond to those claims in light of their own experience. And we did that at the end so we wouldn't sort of taint our earlier questions. And then finally, we asked them what they would want to tell colleges and universities about undergraduate research. And very often they offered sort of personal responses to that, what they would tell their individual college about that. Yeah, okay. And so we can go through um, our main groups of findings. And so our first finding was around the theme of inquiry. And what we learned was that undergraduate research required more from students than even their best and favorite college courses. The students we interviewed were in general really good students and really strong academically, but they would describe to us how even in their course papers, they would kind of write them the night before and kind of just choose the sources they needed. But that undergraduate research really pushed them to do a lot more. Um, we talk about how it gave them a better sense of intellectual agency, how it gave them more authentic audiences, and just how it gave them more meaningful work. We learned from them how undergraduate research built hard skills in data analysis and types of software. It helped them develop research processes and become comfortable with rabbit trails and sort of uncertainty. Um, we learned from them this emotional arc of research. So many of them described how they felt nervous and uncertain as they tried to come up with research questions and as they tried to get findings, and then sort of how excited and relieved and proud they were when they produced something. And finally, along this theme, we learned from them what it meant to make an authentic contribution to knowledge. So, presenting at a conference, or presenting to a group of people on campus, or publishing. In any of these cases, having a real audience made the intellectual work simply more meaningful for them.
Mhm. Kristine mentioned we had a great opportunity to interview people who did undergrad research between the years 1999 and 2002. And that forms our coda. So that's not part of our data analysis. We just tell some stories there at the end, almost like a way to kind of book in the project. And I was surprised how often that third bullet point was coming up, maybe the third and the fourth coupled together. All right, these people 25 years ago, they don't remember their thesis statement. They don't remember the literature they were responding to. But what they remember was, I had a chance to present at a conference and I was super nervous. Like those the first kind of words out of their mouth as they think back 20 plus years. And so that was just really cool to hear how these experiences stay with people.
Right. So our second major theme we cover is this idea of belonging. And one of the things we were really attentive to as we were writing the book was the B in DEIB. And we learned that undergraduate research really can foster multiple forms of belonging. And that's true often for students who are first generation or not traditionally represented on campuses. And we also learned that belonging is often the result of excellent and intentional mentoring. So we have different categories of belonging we talked about in the book. Social belonging is what we often think of, or what students often think of when we think of belonging. And that simply means having friends and having a community. And for many undergraduate researchers, especially ones who got to participate in cohort programs, like an intensive summer experience or a cohort honors program, undergraduate research really was a way of making friends and social connections. Um, Campus community belonging refers to sort of being at home on your home campus and in academia. And we heard again and again from students that doing undergraduate research gave them, they would say, this insider view of how college works. That was either the result of working with a mentor or the result of their own projects. But they said, yeah, as a result of doing research, I know my way around campus. I know people. I understand what's going on here. It gave students academic belonging. So a lot of students said that they were sort of not visible to themselves academically until a mentor sort of said, "Hey, I see you. You should work on this project," or "I think you can do this," or "I know you can do this." That when other people saw them, they said, "Yeah, I can belong. I belong in academia. I have agency in academia." And then finally, you'll notice that when we talked about our interview protocol earlier, we didn't actually ask questions about mentoring, but the participants talked a great deal about mentoring. And what we learned was that mentoring is connected to mattering. When students felt that their mentors cared about them and that they mattered, the students felt like they mattered on their college campus. Um, we're maybe hoping to talk about mentoring later, but one of the main things we learned is that students perceive that good mentors balance freedom and control. They give students enough sort of guide rails and guidelines and clear expectations that they feel comfortable in their project, but enough freedom to do their own work and make their own discoveries and have agency that way.
Mhm. As you all know, this theme is so important to student success on our campuses. We heard wonderful stories of students enjoying having ice cream with their mentor, with their faculty mentor, right? That's the memory that first jumps out when we ask about undergrad research. Oh, it was so cool to have ice cream with Dr. Easton that time, right? We also heard stories kind of a negative belonging here where students just kind of said, that was super lonely. I spent the whole library or the whole summer in the library coding data by myself. That was kind of boring. That also was kind of lonely. And so we learned how important it is to be involved in a cohort in doing this work with other people.
All right. And the final theme we trace in the book is that of vocation. And we use the term vocation pretty broadly, both as an instrumental thing. So undergraduate research holds instrumental value in the job market. It gives students skills and resume lines and LinkedIn lines that they do use as part of pursuing their careers. But it also holds this intrinsic value for students. We heard from a lot of alumni about how it was through undergraduate research that they they maybe discovered a passion or trained a passion um, toward what would actually be a theme in their later career. So undergraduate research could be a place to discover a larger sense of purpose. Um, and so the themes we trace in the book are the kinds of skills that students learn and the ways that undergraduate research can really function as pre-professionalization in many fields. And here we're thinking actually not of students who go directly to graduate school. Of course, students who do undergraduate research are professionalizing for graduate school, or they can be. But we were looking at ways that could actually be more. We thought about ways that undergraduate research can build broader competencies, um, writing and communication skills, competencies associated with the liberal arts. We were also interested in kind of habits of mind or dispositions that alumni talked about learning. A lot of them said it was by doing undergraduate research that they first started to think a lot about work-life balance as college students, or they learned the value of persistence and diligence in new ways. And then finally, this idea of vocation extended out to passion and sense of purpose, and undergraduate research being a place where they discovered something they might be thinking about on some level or another for the rest of their lives.
Hmm. We wanted to be careful with this theme right here, is what we're not suggesting is that undergraduate research is a conduit to getting a job, right? And so we want to value learning and knowledge building on its
Mhm,
own without that necessarily that direct transfer to workplace readiness or a specific skill set. So we like this idea of just a sense of purpose, and that could be fulfilled through a specific vocation, a specific job, or just skills that you're honing and that kind of make you who you are. And so we're just looking to
mhm,
see how these undergrad research experiences move you forward in meaningful ways, whatever that might be, grad school, the workplace, wherever.
mhm. Right. And then this is just maybe some suggestions as we close with the summary and open for discussion. The QR code on your screen goes to the book website at Elon, and that website has discussion guides and chapter summaries and a lot of resources if you're interested. But some of the things we'd be happy to talk about today are, of course, anything you want to talk about. But we're happy to talk about what alumni taught us about mentoring, the discussions we had with them about the accessibility of undergraduate research, maybe what some of what they suggested tells us about program design. And then we'd also be happy to talk about just the joys and challenges of studying undergraduate research, particularly the alumni perspective. And we'd be happy to talk more about just our commitments as researchers and our interests as researchers. Um, so I think at this point, if it's okay, I'm going to close the slides. Is that all right? And then we will open it up to everyone.
Yeah, I'm monitoring the chat, so feel free to put your question in the chat, or even better, under React at the bottom, there should be a bar that says React. That will bring a raise hand feature, or by all means, if no one else is talking, feel free to unmute yourself. But I recognize plenty of these names also from our URP exchanges, so I know many of you have your own experiences that maybe you could also share that speak into these as well. But if you have any questions or any stories you want to share, now is your time to unmute yourself or ask it into the chat. Did you guys start out with inquiry, belonging, and vocation, or is that as you were gathering all these stories that's kept what bubbling up and fit nicely into a nice subtitle for publishing purposes?
Just that. We
Yeah.
had no idea what we were doing, Todd, right?
Yeah.
We knew that we wanted to talk to people who had done undergrad research. And that's really the only thing we knew at that point. And so we started having these interviews. And yeah, that's just how that research came together, right? And
Mm.
then we started
Yeah.
seeing how these things were kind of connecting, and seeing how these might be potential themes. Yeah, and so that's exactly that. We kind of let the data
Yeah.
take us there instead of having these three big buckets And it was always shifting. Just that's a challenge most of us have, especially working with qualitative research. You got a lot of interview transcripts. You've had a lot of great conversations. Now trying to find a way to make that into a coherent project, somehow to guide the reader through there clearly, and speak to pressing issues that we're all thinking through.
Yeah, and I think our graduate school research methods profs would probably want me to know, right? We did, and this does show up in the book. When we coded the data, we had I don't know 25 different codes that we applied to the interview data, and I think at some point these three big buckets were kind of the best way to organize all of those. We said that we would go where the alumni led us, right? We said what they tell us is what this will be about, and those are the buckets that emerge. I think for me, maybe for both of us, the surprising part was how much of it ended up being about belonging when we didn't really ask a specific question about that.
Feel free to mute yourself, or you can throw questions into the chat. Margaret's wondering, how were the alumni for interview selected?
So I will take the first. I'll take the first part. The alumni participants for this book come from our two institutions. So both of us teach at undergraduate heavy institutions. And I think what's interesting about both of our institutions is that they have pretty broad admissions, but they also have highly selective pathways. So the students at my institution and Michael's could have attended a far more selective institution, but chose to attend the honors program at our university. Or I think in some cases, and Michael, tell me if this is true, they could also have attended a community college. Right. Anyway, so the students are sort of the students at our two institutions, we think, are relatively representative in a way. Of course, they're not, but academically they are. And so Michael can maybe tell some of this story, but we hunted down as many people as we could get to talk with us. So we contact through various offices at our universities. We contacted alumni who had graduated within about the last 5 years and who had participated in one of a few kinds of undergraduate research experiences. Michael, do you want to tell the story of hunting people down?
Yeah, and a lot of that was once we talked to one person, say, hey, who else do you think would be up for talking to us? That snowball sampling kind of approach. But that's something, we had some great conversations about that. I don't think it made it into the book, but just how important it is to keep in touch with students at our universities so we can hear their stories, so we can learn from their stories, so we can learn from their experiences. I'm very thankful for our alumni office who often keeps up with some of these students so that we're able to connect with them.
The students we talk to too are they skew a little more heavily toward the humanities and social sciences, in part because that's what we were, I think, most interested in. That's something we were. something we were interested in as writing scholars. The other thing I'll note too is that about a third of our research sample were either traditionally underrepresented or non-traditional college students. So our sample is actually a little more diverse than what we know about the students who participate in undergraduate research kind of nationally.
Yeah, Amanda.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
I don't want you to give away the punchline of your book, but I'm pleased to hear your discovery about the sense of belonging, and I hope we'll address Linda's question in the chat next about how to do that. I work currently at a cancer center, and so very STEM-centered research internships, and the colleagues that I talk to are always very surprised when I tell them, actually, one of the most important things about your undergraduate research program is the sense of belonging students will get from it if we mentor them, like we work on all that with them. What I'm wondering is what holes you found, like things that you went into, we all go into our research with our bias. Like, was there something that you looked over these interview transcripts and you go, what's missing here?
Yeah, I guess one bias we had is that we love undergrad research and we love writing. So we wanted everybody to say undergrad research was awesome. And now I'm such a wonderful writer and I love writing myself, right? So that's kind of the disciplinary background we're coming from. But I think one thing that was kind of missing there, thinking about belonging and what structures are in place in your life that might allow you to work in a library often for free over the summer and have housing and have access to food and code data for 8 hours for free. And maybe that'll turn into something, right? So which students was that readily available for? And what students for lots of reasons are not able to be on campus, feed themselves, find a place to live and code data potentially for free with the potential of that leading somewhere in the future. Right. And so we did hear stories of, I was able to live on campus because my aunt was nearby, right? Therefore, I live with my aunt so I could take this summer project. Some students said I could not do a summer project. I had to pay my bills. I had nowhere to live on campus. I had to take care of my sister or my brother or my daughter, right? And so there's interesting conversations about belonging and who is it, especially over the summer. There's a lot of these projects to extend into the summer. And those opportunities, who are those opportunities most readily available to, and who are they might not be readily available to?
Yeah, and I think another thing that maybe it was missing a little bit, and this makes sense, is we heard a lot of good stories, because these were the students who are willing to talk with researchers about their experience 5 years later, right? Now, we did have, and these show up in the book, we did have a few people who said, like, yeah, actually, I didn't have a great experience. My mentor, nothing against Latinists, but like her mentor was a Latin professor who just sort of sent her off to translate stuff and never checked in. Right. She's like, yeah, it actually wasn't a very good experience. And he has a book out of it, but I don't know that I will ever have anything out of this. We had another student, a non-traditional student and veteran, who actually had a really nice research experience. He worked well with his professor. He was compensated for it. It was really good. But he said, he's like, undergraduate research is kind of a nepotistic circle where once you get one experience, you get to know professors and then you get another, and then it's all the same kind of people working with one another. And so I think we didn't have a ton of those stories. I think just, again, for obvious reasons of who was willing to talk. But I think those are out there too, right? And that probably was missing a little bit.
Yeah, thanks for that. I always appreciate those. They're not negative stories, but when students report that they learned something we weren't expecting, it's valuable for our programs. And then I will just say that with our undergraduate research programs, we always try to fund them and provide housing and travel Previously, a lot of that was provided by the NIH, so I'll just leave that right there.
Yep. Yeah.
Linda, I'm not overlooking your question. We shall return to it. But Bethany, just to segue into this as well, Bethany from Radford in Virginia is wondering, do the negative experiences help them define themselves in their career as well?
Oh, I don't know if I would call this a negative experience. And Michael, you'll remember this story and you can probably fill in the details, but we did hear from a number of people, and one of them was actually a woman who wanted to go to law school. And it was her undergraduate research project that showed her that she did not want to go to law school, and that was totally the wrong career for her. So I think so I think some of these negative experiences, people who didn't have the best times, I think they still would say that they did learn something about themselves and what they value and who they want to be. I think the other interesting stories were doing this work sort of shifted me in a different direction.
I think you explained that really well. I'm not sure what I could add to that. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm
Do you
fully on
remember
board.
anything? You remember anything more about her story?
Oh, you're putting me on the spot all of a sudden. Yeah. But yeah, there's just that broad idea, right? Of giving yourself opportunity and space to try something out that might not lead to a direct outcome. That I think that's so valuable. And I'm so thankful for the opportunities that we're able to provide, and that students might have the opportunity to take part of that might not lead to that direct outcome, right? This might not lead to something exactly what we're kind of hoping for, and giving ourselves room to experiment, to try, to take some risks. It's really powerful. Yeah.
All right. Hey, I can unmute myself here. Linda had a question. I think I can interpret it at least two ways, so I'm interested in see how you're going to interpret it. How can we foster that sense of belonging from the start of the college experience?
Love it, love it. Let me just tell a quick story about what's working on my campus at the University of North Georgia, and there might be some things here that could be applicable to your unique context. Our psychological science department does such a wonderful job with this, right? So students want to come in as they call it psychological science. I don't know how that's different than psychology, but I know it sounds very fancy. So they want to come in as psychology majors, psychological science majors, so they all take a cohort of classes together. That's a typical model. But they're introducing undergrad research into those first year student courses. They're then building on that in the second year, then building on that in the third year. And by the fourth year, a lot of our psychological science students are presenting at things like NCUR. They're presenting at local, national, regional undergrad research conferences, because undergrad research was not introduced to them by a professor in their senior year after class. Instead, that was woven into the curriculum for psychological science from the very beginning. So they're already starting to form cohorts by taking these classes together, by starting to build independent research projects, by working closely with professors and feeling prepared to apply for summer research projects if they want to. And so I just see that how that can be such an important part of that first year experience. That does seem to be a very important feature on a lot of our campuses as we're thinking more about student success in the United States, a first year experience type program. And what might undergrad research look like as a part of that experience?
I think another thing that isn't exactly like the start of college, but fostering a sense of belonging into undergraduate research. One of the things that our participants told us is that they often feel like these research opportunities are hidden on campuses. Like you kind of need to know about them, or you need to know the right website or the right person. And I think simply announcing to students in class, like, hey, there is this research opportunity, or even I'm doing a project and looking for people, really just making broad announcements to students and saying, this is something you are welcome to do, I think is part of that visibility and agency, and saying that, no, like, I see you. I think this is something you could do, and you're welcome to do this.
You had mentioned, I think it was under inquiry, how undergraduate research often required more from them. It wasn't something they could just do the night of, or, ask ChatGPT to, help them with their first draft. Um, what was that something with that perspective of the 5 year to 20-year gap? Like, they were then fortunate, or were they still, was that still perceived as like a negative, like being forced, being stretched? Or was that they were grateful for that stretching 20 years later?
Oh yeah. No, I think they were even grateful for it at the time.
Hmm.
Right. I mean, I think they did, right. We did trace the sort of emotional arc of the bigger the project, maybe the bigger the feelings sometimes, right? Um, but no, actually we had one of our participants said to us that she said she's so proud of her senior thesis that
Hmm.
she would hang it on the wall next to her diploma if she could. And this is like 5 years out, and she has a
Mhm.
very successful career. Like, she's done other things in life. Um, no, so I think, a lot of research is about the process, right?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
but I think for many of them, having this product, this thing they did, this thing they published, or a podcast they produced, or, memories of giving a poster at something. No, I think they're grateful for that.
Hmm.
I think some of them some of them I think are like, "Oh, yeah, I did that thing as an undergrad, right? And now I'm in grad school, and, I'm doing bigger things." But no, a lot of them were still really proud of their work.
Hmm. I want to give a quick shout out to another book that we leaned on a little bit called The Meaningful Writing Project. So there's three authors put that book together. They're also focused on writing. And so the Meaningful Writing Project, in which they interviewed a lot of students near the end of the college career and asked them, what is the most meaningful thing you produced in writing as a college student? And then, very similar to our book, they just start breaking down some themes. And one common theme with this most meaningful writing project was that it was unique. It was something that was different, right? And so it's not another thinking in the literature terms, it's not another 4 page literary analysis on a short story, right? This is something very different. And so we found the same thing here, that people were producing different work. This was the first time I presented. This is the first time I did this, right? And how that's a meaningful experience for them. And they appreciate it, as Kristine said, that stretching, to use your term, Todd, in the moment.
And then you used this phrase, which I love, which was under belonging, intentional mentoring. Is that more than just like active present mentoring? Is that like, how does that get fleshed out? How would you define that phrase you used, intentional mentoring?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'll take the kind of the pre, during, and post. So before you have a chance to start this research project, giving them a sense of what are some potential outcomes, right? I use a lot of hiking metaphors, maybe because I'm now near the Appalachian Trail. So before you go on the trail, what's some pre-work you got to do, right? Having a sense of where you want to go, having a sense of how long it will take, having a sense of what you need to bring along, just like undergrad research, right? And so doing some of that work with students and saying, here's how long projects like you're imagining typically take. Here are some things you might need, right? Here's some things to consider. We can only anticipate so much. And then in why they're on the trail, why they're in the project, checking in, seeing how they're doing academically, but as appropriate, how are they doing socially? How are they doing emotionally as appropriate? And then at the end, after you're getting off of the trail, once you're finishing undergrad research, what are these next steps? How might this connect with your vocation, your sense of purpose, where you want to go after you graduate from this university? And so that's one way I'm thinking about intentional mentoring. Instead of just being available to troubleshoot APA format right over email as a mentor, helping them before, during, and after that research experience.
We've got two more questions in the chat, but just once again want to encourage you, if you have any experiences on this theme of alumni that you also want to share, by all means, we have these experts here. Let's question and glean from them. But if you have experiences well you want to share, by all means, you feel free to unmute yourself, and you can keep throwing questions in the chat or unmute yourself and ask them yourself. But Elizabeth Ambrose is wondering what the next steps for your research projects are, and do you seek to expand the interviews?
Oh, yeah, this is a fun question. So this was kind of the culmination of several research projects Kristine and I did. We have a separate article out about time use diaries, where students who are doing undergrad research are actually keeping real-time diaries, kind of tracking what they're doing and how they're feeling about what they're doing. We had a chance to edit a special issue of a journal, and all that kind of culminated into this project. Kristine and I have not talked next steps. But I don't know if we have a particular next step together in terms of researching a project. Just now, speaking for myself, next steps are, how can I better support the structures that are already in place on my home campus, and how can I build on those structures based on what students have told me? Because as I mentioned before, it's so easy for me to implement structures in place that worked for Michael when he was an undergrad researcher at Georgia College in the years 1900, right? So those structures worked in a unique context. How can I build on what students are telling me about what works, what doesn't work, and support the great work students are already doing on the campus where I work?
Yeah, I think, you never close a research door, but one of the things I think the two of us are looking forward to in the next year is actually doing some work with the undergraduate research community in our home discipline of writing studies, and working with an undergraduate research workshop in the fall. So,
And then Laura's wondering if you could see any differences between outcomes for students who maybe did a longer term project like a thesis, compared to students that maybe participated in a shorter term, maybe just a summer REU 10-week or less kind of experience.
yeah. So the language of outcomes is hard there, right? Because we were, I think, trying to learn about their experience and their process. One thing I would note is, I think, well, two things. So one is, those two experiences were really different. And I think sometimes students who did the thesis over a longer period um, might have had more personal agency and investment in their topic because it was theirs. But sometimes they didn't have as close or as productive a relationship with a mentor. Not always. But they might have taken a thesis preparation class and really only worked closely with a professor for maybe one semester. The ones who did intensive summer experiences sometimes came out of the project with, not as large of a product, but often they had really good mentoring experiences and really formed close community with their other co-researchers. Um, that's one thing I would say. The other thing I would say is, I think we've used the phrase before that research begets research. Many of our participants actually did both. So doing a summer research experience would then lead to an idea for a thesis, or they would continue working with that faculty member, throughout the academic year, or vice versa. So many of the students we talked to actually had multiple experiences.
We've got time for just a couple more questions. So if you want to unmute yourself or throw it in the chat. Oh, Margaret, I see you. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi, thank you, Kristine and Michael, and congratulations. This is really awesome. I'm excited about reading the book. I just wanted to kind of recommend, if you don't have time to write a book, maybe something you could do on your campus to increase alumni engagement. And this is something that we did at my home institution, Brandeis University in Massachusetts. And this was during the pandemic, I believe in 2021. We invited alumni who had engaged in undergraduate research between 6 months and 10 years in the past. And we invited them to join a Zoom session Q&A with current undergraduates. And we had about 10 alumni participate and probably double the number of students. And both the alumni and the students really enjoyed it. So the outcome was just the session and the sense of goodwill. But I would suggest that maybe it's a good place to start, and then you get some insights that you might not get if you didn't have such a session.
Oh, that's great. What was what I mean, yeah, what was one insight that emerged from that? Do you remember? That was interesting.
Well, mainly it was that even students who had graduated 10 years prior and were doing something totally different, the huge impact their undergraduate research and mentor experience had on their life, even outside their chosen professional path.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Thanks for sharing that. That's awesome.
Nearing our time, so I'll do a final call. By all means, you can use the chat. You can unmute yourself if you have any fellow questions. We'll be happy to talk about them. Or if you have any experiences with what you do on your campus with alumni or engaging with alumni researchers, we'd love to have that expertise shared to the whole group as well. Plenty of thank yous. My
Awesome.
final question then would be for your fourth question, respond to the scholarly claims about UR. Were there any things that did surprise you in the responses to that, or were most of the scholarly claims kind of vindicated by this qualitative research project?
Yeah, most of them were. They were readily able to see, yeah, that was helpful for oral communication. I did a lot of writing. That was helpful. I think we kept talking about belonging during our time together today. And I think that was one that kind of made them kind of tilt their head a little bit, because that's one that's kind of, I feel like a relatively unique term in higher education language. But also just I don't think a lot of them are readily making that connection, that how that helped me become more part of a university campus. With prodding, some people can kind of make that connection, but that was a kind of a different one that caused a little bit of pause. And said, oh, I guess I did spend time with people. I guess I did get to know my professor more. Like, they kind of talk their way into an answer with that. And so that was kind of surprising to me. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was a chicken and an egg thing too, right? So some of them said, oh, no, I was already super comfortable and happy at college before I did research. And then some of them said, oh, by doing research, I actually made these connections and made friends and finally, right? And so I think there is there's an accessibility question there of, is it the students who are already kind of well connected and happy at college who will then pursue this opportunity?
Well, thank you, Kristine and Michael, for this project and then coming and sharing your findings with this lovely group. We will be posting a recording of this. Once we get it processed, we'll email that out to you, as well as a link to the book. So I'm sure there are more ways to engage with the book, and we encourage you to download it, buy it, whatever, consume it, and and glean from the alumni that they interviewed, and then also think about how you could engage with the alumni on your campus as well. Thank you, everybody. Have
Yeah.
a wonderful day.
Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you.